about the collective. It's all about championing representation and seeing more South Asian beauty inclusion within the mainstream beauty industry. And we have an incredible conversation today with some amazing women on this panel. We've got Divia, Thani, Sujata, Assomull, and Kaur Sohal. Sohal, correct? So I would love to obviously talk to them more about South Asian, how the South Asian industry is being influenced within fashion and beauty. So just to introduce everyone, we've got Sujata, who is a pro-age advocate. She's a journalist, a columnist, launch-in-chief for Harper's Bazaar, India, and is also a contributor to Vogue Business. We've got Divia Thani, who is the global editor for Conde, Nast Traveler. She manages 7 editions worldwide, including UK, Middle East, China, India, and some in Europe as well. And then we've got Kaur Sohal, who's an amazing PR powerhouse. She has launched some incredible brands here in the UK, including Fable and Mane. And she's also doing amazing work within the South Asian community to really champion South Asian inclusivity and diversity when it comes to beauty within the mainstream industries. So we will just start and kick this off because there's so much to talk about. So my first question is, South Asian culture has a rich history in beauty and fashion. Can each of you share a moment or a trend that you believe significantly showcases this influence in the mainstream industry? So maybe we can start with Jazz.
So I've been in the cosmetics industry for the last 20 years, and it's only in the last 4 that I've seen a huge transition in the beauty industry that is really embracing diversity and culture, and especially South Asian beauty. It's funny because I felt like I went on mat leave, I came back, and all of a sudden this industry that I'd been in for 15 years that hadn't ever even touched on South Asian beauty, all of a sudden, it was everywhere, and it felt like a completely different world. And what I would say is, I think what's really put us on the map for beauty is not only South Asian-founded brands, but we also have now South Asian models. And, you know, Divya being a global editor for Conde Nast Traveler, I mean, that was unheard of in the UK many, many years ago when I first started out. So this, you know, people like that have really put us on the map for sure. And seeing rituals that we have grown up with, but they've always been in the background because we didn't talk about it, you know, in our professional setting. Eyebrow threading, you can actually have that done in Harrods and Harvey Nichols. Henna, we have Bhavan here, founder of Henna Beauty Bar in Selfridges. I mean, that's incredible that you can go and have your henna done in Selfridges. And then we have hair oiling. Who would have ever thought we would have seen hair oiling in department stores, on Bridgerton? So there's a lot that's happened that has really worked together at the right time to make people stand up, pay attention, and make sure they include South Asian representation in their work.
And it's so lovely, isn't it, when you see moments like that, you feel so proud.
Oh my God, totally.
I feel so proud when I see moments like that. Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. I remember when I first started out in the industry, for me to feel like I was included, I had to go and buy, Asian Woman magazine, not a mainstream magazine, or I had to go to an Asian bridal fair to see what brands were maybe right for me. It was never, ever mainstream. So it's incredible to see it everywhere, and it's normal.
Amazing, and there's still more work to be done,
yes.
though.
Oh,
there's so much work to be done. This is the beginning, absolutely. What about yourself, Sujata? What would you say?
I think, like she said, to pinpoint one moment, which is something we all love to do, we like to say, okay, this changed the conversation, is wrong. There is such a collective contribution of creatives and artisans, especially when it comes to fashion, but creatives from the West and India who put everything together. It's a huge redress we're doing. India's contribution to material culture is huge, And so huge is that in the 16th and 17th century, France and England actually banned imports from India because we were such a threat in the fashion and textile industry. But I do think that we did see a huge moment last year. And of course, that was one of the things that started that was with the pre-fall Dior show. It was LVMH, huge fashion conglomerate, Dior, such a French proud house, admitting and putting Made in India on the label. And I know Divia was there, and it was a real moment. All of us were very, very proud. But more importantly, Chanel had done a show called Paris Bombay in 2011, and that was a huge moment, and it was beautiful, and there was Lakshmi Menon on the ramp, and even the beauty collection was inspired by India. But at that time, they didn't say which houses and who the Indian hands were behind those clothes. What Dior did is they said it's Chanakya. These are the people, and they actually showed the craft people, and that was huge. But going alongside that, as I said, it's all a movement. We had Rahul Mishra make his debut at Paris Fashion Week the year before, and then a few months before, Gaurav Gupta, and I know that Conde Nast Traveller supported him a lot, making his debut. And finally, Indians were not just the producers, they were seen as the creators, as the makers, as we were the people who made the trends. And I think that was a really huge moment. But like you said, it's just a start. This redress goes back centuries. This is just a start. And I think it's only going to get better. And it makes me so happy to see that labels, be it an Isabel Marant or whoever, now proudly put on them, Made in India.
Absolutely. And going back to the Dior show, I remember watching all the stories behind the scenes, all over social media, and it was such a proud moment. And I remember just sharing it all, thinking, oh my goodness, this is such a big moment for us as a South Asian community to really be proud of our culture and our heritage. That's amazing. Thank you, Sujata. And Divya, what about yourself?
I think one of the big things that's happened in the past few years is that politically there's been a big shift in the way that India is perceived. And one of the amazing benefits of that shift, and I was born and raised in India, I've only moved to the UK a few years ago. But what has been amazing for me to see is that I can see in the past decade that Indians and South Asians overall have a confidence today that I don't think existed in us 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I went to college in America, and at the time, I remember I wanted to fit in. I was the one adapting to make sure that I was fitting into where I was going. And I think that has completely changed today. I think that wherever South Asians go today, and today you see us everywhere, right? Today we have South Asians are in Cannes, dominating a red carpet. They're in Davos. They're in all the places that matter. They're on every international stage and every international platform. And what's happening that's different is that, first of all, there's women in there. And there's women who are very happy to wear their saris, even while they're pairing it with Prada or Dior or whatever it is, but they're very happy to wear their saris. They're very happy to do their hair the way we do it at home. They're very happy to just embrace everything that is genuinely South Asian. They're not ashamed of it anymore. We're not sort of doing that only at our Diwali parties, but we're all sort of running around in pants and dresses otherwise. And I know a lot of us do this. I wear saris to a lot of international events when I'm in the UK, and I think that it really does matter because us not having to get that validation from the West, I think is a big shift. And when we show up with confidence, with that power, happy and proud of who we are, without the need to disguise it in any way, I think that has been a big sort of change, and that has made a big shift in the perception of India and the way people see it and the way that they accept that culture now.
And I think what's really nice also is because we are talking about it, we're all talking about our culture, we're owning it, and I think for me personally, I'm raising 2 teenagers, we want them to feel part of the conversation, not feel excluded, or not being able to see someone on a poster or a billboard and think, I don't engage or relate to that person. So I think it's been so lovely to see women of our generation really own our culture, whereas when I was growing up, it was all about, I'm not sure if am I Indian, am I British, or where do I fit? Is it too embarrassing? Do I need to fit in with the society I'm growing up in? So that's absolutely perfect. So Divya, I've got a question for you because of the role you have within Conde Nast Traveller. Is how has the increase in travel to South Asia influenced perceptions and adoption of South Asian beauty and fashion trends in the West? You've already touched on it a little bit already, but is there any, through your travels and the people you meet, it would be lovely to just get a little bit more.
So I think that I will say, first of all, there hasn't been a significant increase in travel to South Asia. Since the pandemic, we're still not a massive tourism destination, unfortunately, in South Asia. But I think what has been really interesting is two things, I will say. One is that the number of Indians traveling outside of India has grown exponentially. Yeah. And that is expected. We are now the fastest growing travel market on the planet. And therefore, you see Indians pretty much anywhere you go. And I think, again, like I said, when they're traveling with confidence and not trying to be someone that they're not, that makes a big difference. Part of it is simply, I think, economics, and geopolitics have a lot to do with it. In the past few years, and Sujata can speak to this with great authority as well, the luxury industry has looked at India in a way today that is looking at India in a way today that I don't think they have in many, many years now. Part of it is because India is a growing economic powerhouse. Another part of it is, in all honesty, that most luxury brands have pulled out of Russia. China is going through a slowdown. So really, if you look at it in terms of emerging markets, the Middle East and India are now extremely powerful. So that, again, changes the way that people see the country and changes the way people see the culture. They're more open to it. There's more travel there. People are looking at it with greater interest and fascination. The other thing that I think is really interesting to me is that when we talk about beauty in India, of course, we have lots of traditions, which Jazz has also touched upon, and Aarti, you know very well. But I think what's also really lovely and unique to us is that beauty and wellness and health in India are all combined. And when we think about all of the home remedies, and I know Sakshi in her earlier panel was talking about this as well, when you think about our home remedies, or you think about the face packs our mums used to use, or what we used to use for skincare, there were no chemicals. It's a bit of dahi on your face in the morning, and that sort of thing. And it's so tied into wellness and health, and things like turmeric, things like yoga, things like honey, all of these things. Food is medicine, which I think the whole world today is catching on to. It's something, again, that's really sort of intrinsic to our culture. And if you look at all of the big wellness destinations in India, if you look at places like Ananda or Vana, or all of the Ayurvedic ashrams and clinics that we have down south, all of this today, since the pandemic, there has been a major shift in the way people look at health and wellness and beauty. And India is really at the root of that. And so I think when people today are talking about beauty, they're talking about it in such a holistic way. That's a massive shift. And India there has an outsized role to play, because we know this. I would say we know it better than anyone else does. So I think that really is a space that we can and we should own, and I hope that more Indian companies are thinking about how we can really take this to the world, and again, also bring people into India because of this, because it really is rooted in an authentic environment there. So to me, that's the most fascinating part of it. So I think it's really two things. One is about Indians that are actually traveling outside that have done a lot. And the second is, I think, the perception of beauty and the connection to health and wellness is really important. And we really do own that.
There's so many people in this country who are obviously non-Asian with their yoga clubs. I mean, every other gym has a yoga session going on, and it's just so interesting to see the adoption of that in this country. But thank you so much. That's wonderful. Going back to Jazz, the queen of beauty, PR, how have traditional South Asian beauty practices and ingredients been integrated into global beauty trends? Any specific examples? And again, Divya's already touched on some of those ingredients, but we'd lovely to know your kind of...
Yeah, definitely. Just going back to Divya's point about Ayurveda and that trend in wellness that has now caught on by the West. I mean, it was picking up before the pandemic, but during the pandemic, people actually had time to switch off and do their research. And it is the Indian practices like Ayurveda, yoga that are all, making their way west even further.
Turmeric.
But yes, so in terms of ingredients, it's really interesting actually, because a brand I worked for in the past, a major global retailer told them to take the words amla and ashwagandha off the label years ago, because people are not going to understand this. They're not going to know what it is. You'll alienate people. However, brands have now stuck by these ingredients, and you have people that are non-Asian talking about amla and ashwagandha, and they understand it. So a lot of education has been done in terms of what these ingredients are, where they come from, why we use them, why they're so powerful. And again, it takes confidence to say, no, I'm keeping that on my labeling. And I think it's only now that we have the confidence to say no, whereas before it was a case of fitting in, only using, the words that people know, coconut, okay, let's use it, everyone knows that, So I think ingredients definitely are a big part of our culture, and people are now seeing that is also a part of Indian beauty.
And what is your opinion on mainstream brands taking those ingredients and trying to use them more for their marketing purposes? Do you have an opinion on that, or do you think they should try and engage more kind of the South Asian community or the people that understand those ingredients to really give those ingredients more justice, how it forms part of the culture?
Yeah, I think brands who do it well, they have their storytelling in place, and they will have justifications for why they use something, the heritage of it. And then obviously you're always going to get brands that just want to tap into a trend. Usually those brands aren't going to be sustainable. It's usually like a one-hit wonder. They've jumped on something. But I think brands who do it properly and are willing to work with South Asian representatives, so whether that's working with, a public relations expert who is an expert in that area, or working with, people like the setup that you've done for South Asian Beauty Collective, to get the right expertise and to understand how do we communicate this in the right way, which people do we use. There's a lot of boxes to tick off, but I think it can be done effectively. Personally, I don't find it offensive if a non-Asian brand is taking inspiration from the East. I'm proud of it, and it excites me, to be fair, as long as it's done correctly and the storytelling is perfected.
It's funny because when many years ago, Kiehl's came out with their turmeric mask.
Yes.
And I was just all over it. I was like, this is the best thing ever. So if you're having a haldi ceremony, just go and buy their turmeric paste, because you won't get any side reaction. Yeah. Otherwise, everyone else would say to me, Aarti, I'm getting an allergic reaction. What do I do? Thank you so much, Jazz. Going back to Sujata, I love Sujata's passion for fashion. So Sujata, what are some of the key South Asian fashion elements that have been embraced by mainstream designers, and how have these elements evolved in Western fashion? I love this topic, by the way.
I think obviously embroidery. I mean, Paris Couture Week just finished, and I would say over 50% of all the surface ornamentation we saw there came from India, whether it was from a creative house from the Middle East, whether it was from a creative house from India, whether it was from a creative house from America, or it was a creative house from Europe. A lot of the surface embellishments and embroideries come from India, and finally we're speaking about that. But I also think there are other things, the drape. I mean, the sari goes back thousands of years. There are over 108 ways to drape it, according to the sari historian Rita Shrishti Kapoor. And I can see that people are going in and looking and taking so much from drape, from our sari, and also the shawl is such a huge thing. It's in everybody's closet. And I think while we talk about embroideries, not enough emphasis is given to the sari and the shawl. And I really think there needs to be more talked about how much the sari and shawl has influenced designers, and how the shawl is just a part of every person's wardrobe, particularly if they're traveling.
Never leave home without it.
You drape it very well as well. It's funny you mentioned the sari draping because Jean-Paul Gaultier's, some of his collections are very...
I think designers, I mean, it goes back to what Balenciaga in 1965 who did saris, and Christian Dior himself did a sari, I think, it was a princess from Belgium or somewhere. So the sari has been an inspiration for many, many years. I just wish when something was sari-esque, like you said, they would admit it and say that it's sari-esque. And I think they just call it a drape. And quite often they call it Grecian. And it's not Grecian, it's actually Indian. And that's something that really, I think, needs to be redressed.
And I mean, here in the UK a few years ago, this is not going on the designer level at all. But, you know, there's brands like ASOS and Next who are selling like Lenga Jolis. Next are selling, you know, kurta tops. What do you think about brands who are starting to do more of that? I personally think it's great.
I think it's wonderful. I just think, as I said, you need to credit and get it right. I mean, I don't know if you all remember, was it and just like that, was it 2 years ago when they couldn't tell the difference between a sari and lehenga? Now that irritates me. Yeah. And that means you haven't, as you said, used the South Asian expert. If you are going to do it, do speak to a South Asian, be respectful. I think we're very, like you said, all of us are so happy to see, you know, other brands look at the sari or look at the lehenga choli or look at the kurta, but just be respectful. I think that's all we're asking.
Yeah, it's so true. And going back to the Lehenga Choli, I've seen so many mainstream brands, high street brands that are doing, I mean, it's not...
But even on the red
embroidery,
carpet, the sort of crop top and the skirt that you see today
the maxi skirt
is so much inspired by the lehenga.
Yeah.
You know, and they say a crop top and full skirt.
So my next question is, there's often, because this is a conversation me and Pavan have a lot as well, there's often a fine line between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation. And again, Sujata's already touched on this. You can expand more if you like. How do you think the industry can better navigate this distinction when incorporating South Asian influences?
As I said, I think it's very simple. I think we all love when cultural exchanges happen. That's the best thing that can happen to creativity. Some of the best fashion and beauty we have seen is through cultural exchanges. But what we want is we want to be credited, we want transparency, and we want acknowledgement. It's just simple. If these three things are done properly, then it's not cultural appropriation, it's cultural appreciation. And there is nothing more beautiful than cultural appreciation, especially in creative industries.
And actually, talking about Bhavan, you had a case like this because, for the audience, just referencing Bhavan because she did henna on Perry Edwards, and there was a backlash that it was, you know, about cultural appropriation, and there's the side like us that appreciate seeing our culture in this way, but there's obviously, you know, there's another side to it.
Yeah, I think we've got to be really careful because we keep calling cultural appropriation. People then get scared to come and do something. So it's a really fine grey line. And I think when we, you know, especially with social media, and it's so fashionable, if you like, to call cultural appropriation, we've got to be really careful when we call out because we're actually making people not want to go that way, which is not a good thing.
Yeah. I love your cultural appreciation. That's good. We'll use that. Hashtag that.
I think it's also just really important to recognize that, you know, in the case of henna, for example, right? Henna is used in South Asia. It's used across the Middle East. It's used in Africa. If you think about a lot of the products or the traditions that we're talking about, you know, this fabulous new book that's come out on just eyeliner. And it's amazing, but how eyeliner has been used by women across the world in different ways to express themselves, and it means different things in different cultures. And the truth is, you can't attribute one thing always to a specific culture and say that we own it. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? We don't know where these things really originated from. We have an idea, we sort of have a guess, but we don't really know it, and we can't own it. So I think it's really important, yes, we're all a bit annoyed that California has sort of owns yoga in a certain way. I mean, I think that probably annoys a lot of us. But the truth is that yoga is for everybody. And I think one of the beauties of traveling the world is that you are inspired by different cultures. And if you don't bring that inspiration home, and if it doesn't find its way into your creative expression, whatever it is you do, whether you're a writer or designer or stylist, whatever it is you do in your life, what a waste. We should be inspired by different cultures and by the people that we meet. So I think Suja's right. I mean, absolutely acknowledge it. And there's a real beauty and power in saying, look, I went to India, I saw this amazing thing. There are people that do it all the time. You can count. I mean, how many designers...
Norton, the way he does
exactly.
it, I think is a perfect example of cultural appreciation.
Absolutely. And I've lost track of how many designers we talk to who have all been to Jaipur and come back, and suddenly everything they do is pink and orange and bright. And they all come back and they say they've never seen color like they've seen in India and specifically in Rajasthan. And that's a beautiful thing. And I hope it does keep inspiring people. So I think, yes, absolutely. But we're living in a time where I think we're making people very afraid to take a risk. And I think, like you said, if you just admit to it, if you're just honest about where it comes from, you really can't do any wrong, because the people that are invested in this are all really happy that they're sources of inspiration.
Absolutely love that. And also just going back to the beauty world, because that's where I come from, seeing brands not just try and replicate something that will attract those, South Asian audiences, but, collaborations like we saw recently with Estee Lauder and Sabyasachi was such a beautiful moment. I was so proud seeing an OG brand like Estee Lauder, which we all love, collaborate and not just try and use Sabyasachi or as an inspiration, but to get him involved with the project, and is still going viral. So yeah, thank you so much. I hope we're doing okay for time. So my next question is, can you all share a personal anecdote or an experience where you saw a significant, I would just answer this, saw a significant South Asian mainstream influence in your field? Mine was the Sabyasachi Estee Lauder one. Jazz?
I would probably say mine was when I was Global PR Director for Fable & Mane. That was because I'd worked for L'Oreal, I'd worked for LVMH for 8 years, and then I started working with startup brands. So to work for Fable & Mane was my first South Asian founded, South Asian ritual inspired brand that I worked on that was global. For me, that was an incredible experience because it was a brand that you could find in Sephora in the US, in Selfridges in London, and everything about it was South Asian, and it was a very kind of nostalgic feeling for me after 20 years of being in the industry.
Would you say it was a bit
French brands, American brands, me, a South Asian person working on these brands, representing them, but then representing a brand that was so aligned with me. It was quite a magical experience, I would say.
Did you feel you could start owning your culture more and your heritage more and be more outspoken about it?
Yeah, definitely. It goes back to that, being confident. It's like wearing a sari to, an international event. It felt like that. The way I owned an event or an activation or, a campaign was with a new type of confidence.
Amazing. Sujata, what about yourself?
I think when we launched Harper's Bazaar in India, which was 2009-10, we did an exhibition for the launch, because it happened to be the same time as the International Herald Tribune Luxury Conference, where we asked brands, including Dior, and that sari was shown it, and we asked them to show pieces inspired by India and to actually talk about each piece. And that at that time, brands were not talking about India. And we had Oscar de la Renta and Alberto Ferrati, and to see that room full of some of the best brands in the world and the way they had worked with India And I think that really started a conversation in India. And the other thing is, at that time, brands wanted us to use head-to-toe looks. And I just refused to do that. And I said, no, you, even on a cover, you have to mix them with Indian labels, because that's the way an Indian woman dresses.
Yeah.
Our wardrobe is one of the most exciting wardrobes in the world, because we will mix a sari with a Dior jacket, or we will wear, a lehenga skirt with a cream shirt, or we will, put mojaris on or wear kolhapuri chappals with our jeans. And I think that we really pushed that conversation. And now I see that happening in magazines all over the world. You'll see a kolhapuri chappal in maybe a Spain issue, or an issue of Italy.
So true.
And that, to me, just makes me feel very proud and very happy.
So true. So I've noticed that as well. It's so true. Divya?
My own influences have really been more in the literary world. So I think for me, seeing writers and growing up reading writers like Salman Rushdie or Jhumpa Lahiri, who won a Pulitzer for her first book of short stories, which was all about the immigrant Indian experience. All of those writers really, really influenced me and impacted me growing up. And I think when sort of understanding how the world was seeing India through these books and really sort of being immersed in this culture, really always made me feel like there was space for us. So I think that these writers have done us a tremendous credit, and continue to do that. Abraham Verghese's book last year was just an absolute breakout hit, The Covenant of Water, set completely in Kerala through, I think goes through about a century or 3 generations. And these are books that make people fall in love with everything that we are and the culture that we are. And I love that there's actually no visual representation of that at all. It's actually all just words, and you're conjuring up the images in your mind. And there's something really powerful about that. And soft power, I think what we're all talking about is really the soft power that India has, is amazing. And that's something that everyone is really leaning into. And I think it has tremendous strength. So I think it's going to take us great places.
I need your reading list, by the way.
Can I add one moment for me, and this is slightly connected to Divya, but one moment for me that really made me go, wow, like something's happening, was when Conde Nast Traveller had their first Diwali party in London. For someone who'd been in the industry for God knows how many years, worked with Conde Nast, Hearst, or all the big publishing groups, to have a Diwali party, to me, I mean, that for me was amazing. So kudos to you.
Thank you. We had an amazing party last year in collaboration with Cartier to celebrate Diwali, and thank you for that. It was definitely one of, I would say, probably the highlight of my time here, just because I felt like Diwali is obviously so important to all of us in this room, but I think I wanted it, I hadn't, like I said, I haven't been in the UK for that long, but I hadn't really seen it being celebrated in the way that we celebrate back home, which is actually very fun and very glamorous, with everybody really turned out, and it's such a celebration. It's so authentic, and yet people are having such a great time. And I just wanted to, I think it just came out of the fact that I was really homesick, but I wanted to just have a party that got everyone together in the way that I know it from back home, and it was tremendous. And thank you for the support that all of you gave it, because all of you did. And it was really just an amazing gathering of people. And I think what was really lovely is that, so much of this conversation, I think, is about how South Asian culture is being perceived globally. It has to start from us, and it has to start with the way that we see our own culture and the way that we are happy to talk about it, to express it, to demonstrate it, and to just live with it really comfortably. I think that's the key, is to just be comfortable in it ourselves. And I think when we do that, the world really does pay attention and notices it.
And if anyone can support with a national holiday on Diwali in the UK, please help me, because I'm still trying. Yeah, so our time is up, so I don't think we've got any time for Q&As, but grab us outside. I think now I would just like to say thank you to these amazing women for supporting today, but also being the backbone of the South Asian Beauty Collective. And yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it was amazing.